How has an idea like this not been explored? Spotify was able to accomplish this for listening to records, and Audible and audiobooks were able to do this for listening to books.
What can we do that's never been done before with sound? I think this is born from that community, and I think that having them be a part of the story of bringing this to life and bringing it to the consumer is the only way to do this.
There's an entire world out there for people who are really interested or in need to listen to their favorite movies.
Maybe it's time to adapt this for the big screen. Maybe it's time to actually try to make the next larger, grander version of a work with our audience.
All right. Welcome to, I guess this is the first episode installment of the Cassette pod.
I know we don't get to do much work face to face, so it's fun to actually do this.
Yeah, I know, right? Alex, first I want to, before we even do any introductions or give any background, we're sound design people. It's something that's really important to us in the whole filmmaking and entertainment space. I want to go through and ask you if there are any movies that you think out there that wouldn't work without the sound design. And of course, every movie wouldn't work without the sound design. But one that you think of immediately as the sound in this movie is something really special that kind of makes it.
Absolutely. I think movies are made by stories and sound, but I think this one is just totally amplified by the music and the sound effects in it. And it's not a deep track. It's Star Wars. The original series, we're coming in with that first time we hear a lightsaber beam up, the first time you hear Darth Vader breathing into his mask. I think all those things set the tone for the goodness, the bad, the evil, the great in the whole story. I think without those like iconic noises, you can hear that lightsaber, you can hear Chewbacca, all these things. I just can't imagine that movie being the same.
Yeah. You know what? I don't know if this is true, but I heard some time ago the way that they made the blaster sound in Star Wars was with like a metal cable. I think they smacked a metal cable with a crowbar or something like that, and it created this like echoey sound. I'm not completely sure if that's true, but the fact that there's so many creative, I think they're the Foley artists in Hollywood,
Yeah.
that they're so creative with sound and the way that they're able to mix sound together. It's like sometimes even rare that you're making a sound digitally rather than just trying to find it out in the world and make it sound so realistic.
Totally. You can imagine back in the late 70s, it probably wasn't digital sound. This is analog. That's what we had access to. And not only did they do great sound design there, but they also reused some sounds. The Wilhelm scream.
It's iconic.
And they actually do use it in there. And so it's not like everything was reinvented, but I do think that they really immerse us in the world with all those sounds. I mean, TIE fighters, you can hear those little spaceships with kind of the walls and the sides of them flying through. That sound will never leave my ears since the first time I saw it as a kid.
I think Star Wars is a great example. I think for me, there's a few movies that I think of immediately where I'm like, sound design is paramount to this film success, and it makes you feel uncomfortable and it makes you feel like so immersed in the space. One that I think of is the sound effects in Get Out, more specifically with the teacup, where she's hypnotizing him on the chair with the teacup, and it's such a like ear-piercing sound that you almost feel like you're sitting in the chair with him and you're like just as uncomfortable as Daniel Kaluuya's character. And then the other one that I think of is No Country for Old Men. The thing that makes it so special, and if I'm not mistaken, I don't even think there's a score in the movie. I don't even think there's music in the movie. And I feel like that's, in a sense, trying to make you feel uncomfortable. Maybe it's trying to set you in the setting of where the movie's set, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, it is in Texas. It's somewhere in the Western United States. But the fact that there's no score and they're relying completely on purely audio effects, it just makes you feel really uncomfortable with the scene that's being set up. And I think it's really great. I think it suits the movie really well.
I actually have a really funny anecdote about Get Out, which is that I've never seen the movie, but I have listened to the whole thing all the way through. So I had AirPods in, I took a flight, I decided to listen to Get Out, close my eyes, just have the audio on with the narration over it. And I'm sitting in my chair as he's downstairs in the house. I remember him being in the basement, being tied down, and he finds that fuzz in the arm of the chair and kind of puts it, we find out, in his ears to block the sound. And I'm like gripping my chair so tight that the
Yeah.
woman next to me actually asked me if I was okay. I was sitting there so intensely stressed by the sounds of this movie and his obviously very precarious situation that someone next to me actually realized how much stress I was in.
Yeah.
So not even seeing it, I was right there in it. And if you're right, the sounds of that movie were very intense.
Yeah. It's incredible how there's movies that can do that to you. Next, I think we should go into a little bit of an introduction. What we're building with Cassette, who we are, where we come from.
Totally. To introduce myself, I'm Alex, creator of Cassette, and been working on this for the better part of a year. For me, from a technology background, there's always been this question of how do we leverage technology and user experiences to bring goodness to the world, to bring access to the world. I started with accessibility, helping deaf and blind audiences access movies and entertainment more closely so they could join in on the cultural zeitgeist, sharing those experiences with their families, and know the best stories of our time. And since then, have just spent so much time around Hollywood, and I'm now trying to create new ways for people to experience the entertainment that we know and love.
Yeah, definitely. As for myself, I'm Aidan. I have a background in filmmaking. I went to USC for school and lived in Hollywood for 4 or 5 years and was able to immerse myself and see firsthand the power that comes with being able to effectively tell stories, the people that are influenced by storytelling in film and media. And now that I live in San Francisco, like around all of the founder communities here, I constantly ask what inspires people to build companies, what inspires people to do the work that they want to do, and inspires the way they live. And it's more often than not that people are inspired by movies. And so that is something that I hold very, very dear and special, and the amount of influence that it can have on people. And I think that's why I'm here, trying to help bring that sense of accessibility for people and for people to be able to enjoy films more effectively.
Remember times I've heard someone who works in AR or VR mention Ready Player One as an example,
Yeah.
like when a movie impacts technological work. It's crazy how much these things that we experience in our early childhoods into our teenage years and then as adults have such lasting impacts in how we view the world. They are in some ways recreations or complete fiction, but we define even morality and ethics based on what we see there and the characters we want to emulate. And I love it so deeply.
Yeah, I think so too. I've always said that it's near the most powerful skill that a person can have to be able to tell a good story. I think it's more true than ever. Next, I want to get a little bit of background into Cassette. Could you run me through a pitch and how things came about and where you see it headed?
So Cassette was born nearly 10 years ago in a totally different iteration. I had dropped out of college to go build my first company, and I was searching for the thing that I was going to end up working on for the long haul, right? Companies take years to build. And one day a family friend of mine said, "Hey, Alex, I'm getting older, I'm losing my hearing, and I love movies. I want to get to the theater with my family, but I can't experience them easily. Accessibility is not easy to come by. Can you help me?" And that was my entry into the space. I knew I loved movies. I knew I was an app developer. I was 19 years old, maybe 20 at the time. And I decided to look more deeply into it. And I ended up spending a lot of time in a projection booth in Oakland, California, looking at all the technology. I had 3 hours there a week. And with a friend of mine, Braun, who was actually 17 at the time, we were living together just hacking on technology that could help us enable people to watch movies. And what we ended up doing was building this piece of software that you could pull out your phone and tap if you needed subtitles, tap if you needed amplification, or tap if you needed audio description, which was for blind audiences to have the movie narrated to them. And you could walk into any theater in America, pull out this app, and get those accessibility services. You can imagine reading the subtitles on your phone with your screen out. It was like a black screen with little white text that you could view, or put in headphones and have all the audio services you needed to enjoy those movies. And we worked with big studios to make this happen. Pixar's Cars 3 was the first movie we launched with. And we brought this to many films over the course of several years until we ultimately sold it to Charter, which owns Time Warner and Spectrum, and now services accessibility in millions of households across America. And I loved what I got to do there, which was build tech to help people and engage with entertainment deeply, see movies being created, be a part of that process, and then ultimately bring them to people. And through that process, a really unique and odd thing happened. I was spending a lot of time writing and distributing audio description for blind audiences, and to learn more about it, I started listening to whatever audio description already existed. So that's the sound of the movie. It's all the sound effects, all the actors' voices, the music, everything with a narrator put on top. It turns it into a really immersive audiobook. And over the past 10 years, I've listened to more than 500 movies, more than 2,000 episodes of TV, and I've just fallen in love with the idea that I can get on the subway, pop an earbud in, and listen to my favorite stories. I can, before bed, turn this on while I'm exercising. And that made me realize, maybe audio description's made for more than just blind and low vision audiences. Maybe this would be perfect for the consumer who wants to get off their couch, wants to be active in the world, but not lose their connection and attachment to the things they're watching, whether it's the latest sitcoms that are coming out weekly, or I'm watching Severance. Everyone's got The Office or Friends on in the background. You can listen to that as you go. And so that was the catalyst for me saying, you know what, I think I can bring this to more people. Let's start looking into what it'll take to make that happen.
You want to hear something interesting? I've been training to do a half marathon and a marathon coming up. During my training this week, I did about a 13 or 14 mile run. Do you remember the Fantastic Mr. Fox file that you sent me?
Absolutely.
That's what I listened to.
No way.
And I've done all kinds of stuff with my training. I've listened to music, I've done audiobooks, I've used no music and tried to just run and immerse myself into what was happening around me. But it felt so effortless listening to a movie, particularly one that I was already familiar with and that I really loved and that I could follow in such a different way. And so that's what I used on my run. And it made things fly by. It made it really easy. It was pretty cool. I have a follow-up question around this kind of ethos around Cassette. And that's that there's a lot of movie traditionalists out there. There's a lot of people who are interested in the cinematography and visual effects and the sight-based aspects that come with watching your favorite movies. And particularly, there's a lot of people that think movies should be enjoyed in theaters with people next to you laughing at the same things, crying at the same things, hurt by the same things. I'm wondering what your opinion is on that, and if you think Cassette in any way could either satisfy those types of people that have always been film traditionalists, or do you think it actually may hurt the ways that they enjoy watching movies?
It's a great question. And I think that the first thing, easiest to say, is not every product is for everybody. Just the same way there are people that love audiobooks or love having it on paper or love having it on Kindle. Everyone has their version of consuming a book. It doesn't mean that any way is right or wrong or that you get more or less out of it. I think that there are visual spectacles. Christopher Nolan's films, Dune, these are all things that are seen at a grand scale that work really well on the big screen. And I'm not here to say that isn't the case, right? There is beauty in cinematography. It's an art we have been working on arguably since we've been painting landscapes for hundreds of years. We've been thinking about how to capture visuals. But I think from my perspective, great movies and TV are often about the stories. It's about the characters, how they're feeling, what they're saying, how they're showing their emotions and connecting with other people, and how the audience connects with them. And I make the argument that a lot of that happens between the lines of the visuals. It happens in the pauses they take, the breaths they have in their discussion, their conversation, the tension of a violin as a moment comes to fruition, or as we sit there in tense anguish wondering what will happen next. These aren't things you have to see. These are things we feel. And I think that many people who see the visuals as such a core part of cinematography would be surprised how much of it actually happens when you measure sound and time. Those two things that are not visual dependent, you really get deep into the meaning of the words of what people say, than what the music is trying to express out of us and out of the characters. It can work, and I'd say try it. Give it a shot. I'm not going to argue it's the same as watching a movie. It simply isn't. But I think there are a lot of moments to do it. And the final thing I'll say is on the other side, for all the times you're not trying to give the deepest, most artistic look, you're looking for entertainment. Michael Scott in The Office is funny whether or not you're looking at his face. If you've seen that show before and you hear his comedic timing, you're going to laugh. When you hear Robin Williams give his monologue speech in Good Will Hunting to Matt Damon, the way he describes the missing pieces of Matt Damon's life and the things that he hasn't experiences, those land without looking at them. And we can feel all those emotions, the happiness and the sadness in the films that we've already enjoyed, and just be reminded of those moments and how we felt when we first engaged with them. We can expand on the time we can do that by making it audio only.
Something I noticed as well, which I thought was a pretty unique use case for something like Cassette, came from my experience as a filmmaker and as a screenwriter. What I noticed from listening to a movie like Fantastic Mr. Fox rather than just watching it is I was paying a lot more attention to the narrative structure of the film, how it was written, the pauses and dialogue, and how much intentionality the filmmaker really had with all of the aspects of storytelling other than just the visuals. And I'm a very visual person when it comes to film. And so I definitely think I had my doubts at first, but it honestly provided me with a really helpful tool as a screenwriter to more effectively write for my audience. And I thought that was a unique way of thinking about Cassette, and that this could be for these film traditionalists or cinephiles or people who are really interested in movies, because it helps them learn more about how the best movies, their favorite movies, are even made.
I would argue that when we think about a massive scene, let's think about Gladiator, it's like a grand scale in the Colosseum. And as a filmmaker, you can have the most beautiful set. You can have amazing extras filling the stands. You can have the dust moving across as that main character stands there in the moment of either triumph or fear, as before or after the fight. And until you think really thoughtfully about what the sounds are in that moment, the music or the silence, frankly, the sound effects, the crowd dull, is the crowd loud, all these different moments, I think you won't actually get a full picture of that thing. And so I think listening to a film without the visuals tells you so much about whether or not you're creating a full sensory experience for the audience, or if you're really missing it. If you can't feel the grandness of that moment in the audio, you've done something wrong as a filmmaker. And granted, when you listen to Gladiator, they've done it right. If you listen to that scene, you feel the greatness of the Colosseum if you're in there, even without seeing it. If you can do that, then your visuals are only going to make it that much more powerful, and they really add together into something beautiful.
Something I noticed as we discussed the idea for Cassette at first, and I think it was a problem that you had noticed as well, that goes beyond purely accessibility, is this concept around people spending so much time consuming media now that it starts to overtake other aspects of their lives. And I'm wondering if you have any more thoughts on those questions that you had asked when starting Cassette, how Cassette handles those questions as well, and whether or not it can provide this net benefit beyond just sheerly people enjoying movies.
Totally. On a personal note, I know I keep a list of movies and TV shows people say, you got to see this, you got to watch this. And I don't have the time in the day. I'm busy. I've got work to do, and certainly I'm taking content off the list over time. I am sitting down on an evening and watching something, but that list is tens, if not hundreds of titles long at this point. There simply aren't enough hours in my life to do it. But if I say to myself, you know what, there's a show that's on season 4, everyone's saying it's amazing, I gotta go watch it. Oh, seasons 1 through 3 are 10 episodes each. It's gonna take me 15 hours to catch up. In a month of commutes to and from work, just on the subway, I can pick up on the entire story. I can throw an AirPod in and listen and catch up to season 4 without having to sit myself down on the couch and never actually make that commitment. So I think from the catching up to content and being part of the conversation, Cassette unlocks more hours for consumers to do that and be around their stories, right?
I thought about this question too, and I agreed with you in that it provides you the ability to catch up and immerse yourselves in these stories and be able to consume more media without dedicating so much time. But I also think that there's ways where the consumption of the media can be more profound or powerful. Let's say it's not necessarily just on a commute, but imagine if you're listening to a really inspiring cinematic film and you're somewhere inspiring and cinematic. It's stuff like that kind of builds up the whole story in your mind as well, and it allows you to imagine things and use your imagination better.
There's a really important component of this that I think most people don't think of at first glance, but it's children. children have become so connected and attached to their iPads and their screens. There's a whole unscreen movement going on for kids as well as adults. People trying to spend less time in front of their screens.
Yeah.
And as soon as they do, the industry is losing them as customers, right? And so, from a business perspective, it would make sense to unlock these non-screen hours for the Hollywood industry. But from a imagination perspective, I've had people try cassette with their children. They turn on Frozen or SpongeBob in the car over the speaker. And instead of the kids staring at their screen, mouth open, just having the content thrust at them, now they're using their imagination. They're actively spending time thinking about what the scene looks like. And their parent can also engage with them too. The parent's now listening in and can hear and be a part of that storytelling experience. And I think we'd all argue that story time before bed is a much more powerful thing than an hour of TV before bed for a kid. And that's what this is into. So I'm really excited for parents to do that.
Yeah, I think that's super powerful. That kind of segues into what I wanted to talk about next in the principles around building Cassette and what it's all about. One of those, I imagine, is this idea of cinema being a feeling above a screen. And then also, as we talked about, this idea of providing accessible cinema for people who would otherwise not be able to enjoy it in the same light as others. Are there any other principles that you considered while starting Cassette that you felt you wanted to really make it core to the ethos of the company and the brand and yourself as an entrepreneur?
Sure. I think audio first is goes beyond just the content, right? How do we create an experience in the app that is truly audio first? You can imagine that people are going to be using this while they drive their cars, while they go on runs. How do we make the user experience actually audio centric versus on a screen where you're right back to that visual all the time? And so things like audio controls, talk to direct in the app, saying play, pause, can you find me a new track, next episode, play episode 7, season 3 of The Office for me. Be able to engage it that way, I think is really important, both from the accessibility perspective. So you can imagine blind consumers really liking an app that is built to be easily used without the visuals, but also the consumer will really engage with that. I think a trucker who's driving 10 hours a day, keeping their eyes on the road is paramount. How can we make this app as easy to use while they're driving a huge big rig to make this, again, just the best possible app for them? And that's very much in my mind. So audio first is definitely there. Second is, I think the best people to give feedback on the quality of content we're putting out are blind audiences who have been using this since day one. And so one of my commitments as we grow the team and as we build out our production as well as quality assurance and everything is to have blind and low vision staff members, employees who are here to be a part of that. I think this is born from that community. And I think that having them be a part of the story of bringing this to life and bringing it to the consumer is the only way to do this. Part of my story here I didn't share earlier is that I've always had a lot of empathy for this space as someone who grew up with pretty thick glasses and real Coke bottles. I'm wearing contacts since I was a kid. And after Actiview, years after, about 2 years ago, I was traveling overseas and I'm brushing my teeth in a hotel and I spontaneously lose vision in one of my eyes. My retina detached. This is not something that was expected. It's not something that anyone in their late 20s really should have to go through. But I flew home and had several procedures done and never really got full vision back. You'll actually see me often wearing my one eyeglass because I have different vision in each of my eyes. The headaches start to become a problem. I stare at my screen too long or have too long of a day. And so now as someone who lives a little half in, half out of fully sighted and a low vision, I don't consider myself blind. I can still drive a car, I can still use my computer, but I do have these challenges with vision. I feel personally responsible to make it a core part of the company. This is a company born from accessibility that's going to empower the consumer, the general consumer. Do you put the subtitles on your screen when you're at home watching TV?
For sure.
So many people do, right? You open Netflix and you put that on. That was born as an accessibility need for deaf and hard of hearing audiences, right? And now we as consumers engage with it all the time. It seems crazy to me that we wouldn't do this the same way with the way that blind people access their media, right? So I think that doing that is going to make this company just that much stronger.
Yeah, I totally agree. A few more that I considered was firstly this idea of slow media versus fast media. And what I think of with that is fast media is in the short form content realm. And
Your
I think
TikTok, your
often
YouTubes.
TikTok or Reels or YouTube, a lot of these vertical pieces of content,
Yeah.
which I think were, whether it was purposeful or not, were designed to keep you scrolling. I think there was a story that I learned while I was at school, and it was from the guy who developed the infinite scroll feature that's been used on Instagram Reels and TikTok. And I think it was initially designed for Google Maps in order to allow you to infinitely scroll and continue to find restaurants or like bathrooms or gas stations on your road trip, but it was harnessed and used and built for this predatory understanding of human psychology. And it's affected a lot of people, I think, in a negative way. And that's something that I think about with Cassette, is designing tools for people to stop consuming media in this way. And that we don't want people consuming media that will have them like constantly overstimulated in their isolated lives and understimulated when they're out and about. And I think that's a really important aspect of the vision of the company and how we want to see people grow and use this technology.
I haven't thought about it in those words, but I think you're so right. I feel like when I watch a movie or a TV show, especially a TV show where it's like the final episode of a season, I feel a sense of finality. My brain can take a break, can wrap its head around all the things that I just consumed, and there's a peace that occurs with me. Even with the movies that leave you hanging a little bit, there's a piece
Yeah.
of kind of the end of it. When I'm scrolling through those infinite scroll applications, whether it's Reels or TikTok or something, I never get that feeling of satisfaction. There's never a sense of this is the end. There's more a sense of I got to get off this app and do something else. It's been
Exactly.
too long. I've spent too much
Yeah.
time. And I really like that framing from you.
The last principle that I considered was like at its core the idea of creativity. And I think hearing about Cassette and learning about what we're trying to accomplish, I consider the concept of creativity so much because it comes to my mind sometimes like how has an idea like this not been explored? And it feels like such a creative twist on consuming media. Spotify was able to accomplish this for listening to records, and Audible and audiobooks were able to do this for listening to books. But what comes to mind, and something that I had just never considered before meeting you, was that there's an entire world out there for people who are really interested or in need to listen to their favorite movies. And so that it rings in my ear. That's most of the core principles of Cassette is in that sense of accessibility, but with that comes such a heightened sense of creativity about how you're consuming media and just pushing consumers to think a little bit more creatively about these aspects of their life. I'm wondering if there's any other, what the word creativity kind of means to you when you're building, and in the future, if you want to work with filmmakers and artists, what that kind of represents for you.
Yeah, I think well, there's two sides. There's product creativity on kind of the technology, the app, the experience, and there's content creativity, right? How we are actually adapting media to fit this format. And the product creativity, I spoke a little bit earlier about audio first, doing things that apps haven't done before to make this really built for the content that's going to live on it. And I think that's just about having great product people on a team who are asking the core questions. Why are we doing things the way we currently are? Why are content libraries laid out in the grid fashion? Does that make sense for our app? Does it make sense to have the player have a title card with the image of the thing, or should we have something else there? We have to ask all these questions about everything we do in the product. From the content creation standpoint, I think audio description historically has been looked at as a requirement, as a thing you have to do to meet accessibility requirements by law. And by putting it in front of the consumer and showcasing that better audio description creates better business outcomes, I think it'll lead to a heightened quality of production in audio description. And I want directors to actually get involved in how they imagine their story being told, both in the visual and in kind of the core piece of content that we're making for the big screen, but also what it can look like for the audio. I can imagine that they have a very good sense of whether or not they want someone to say, Joey eats a sandwich or Joey chows down on a sandwich. Those are two very different things that speak to the character differently. And having someone involved who knows their, I don't have a better word for it, but their vision for what this could be, I think that I can imagine audio description getting leveled up so far. And I'll say it here first. I don't do a lot of vision boarding and deciding what I want the future to look like. I'm more of a let's get things done now and build things today person.
Hmm.
I do have this belief that if we do this right in a couple of years, there will be at the major awards ceremonies, the Emmys or the Oscars, an award for best audio description, best audio
Hmm.
adaptation of a film or TV show. Feels like something that will be aligned with best score, best music,
Yeah.
best costume design. I think this is just one more way the story gets told in surround sound. And I'm excited for that to become part of the culture and creativity of the industry.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm curious, in the future, if you were to develop originals under the Cassette brand, or if you decided to start producing, and you're able to work with directors and filmmakers and be able to produce projects, how do you envision that relationship looking like?
I think it's really us maybe sharing some best practices we've seen in audio that's worked for people. Hopefully, we have spent many years listening to and figuring out what are best practices for the production and consumption of audio. However, for me, I want to ask the question very deeply, what can we do that's never been done before with sound? What can we
Mhm.
do that tells people scenes are changing? What can we do to tell people the grandness of an environment that they're in, right? You can say that you're in a forest, but how big is that forest? How do we tell these things through sound without adding on too much time of narration? I think there's a lot of things that haven't been explored in audio that I would challenge and hopefully create excitement with that directorial talent and say, you've got carte blanche to do something new. There is no prior art, or at least not
Mhm.
prior art that's made originally for this format. Let's have some fun with it. Let's try stuff. And
Yeah.
I think there is a type of director and leader and producer that will really rise to the occasion of that challenge and fall in love with that medium of creativity and production.
Yeah. Do you see them still wanting to create a visual adaptation, or would it entirely be audio focused?
It's a great question. I think the same way that books often get turned into movies if the stories resonate with an audience enough, I think this is the exact same thing that could happen, right? Where it might
Hmm.
not be, let's try and take camera shots to match the audio we produced, but rather maybe it's time to adapt this for the big screen. Maybe it's time to actually try to make the next larger, grander version that will work with our audiences for that. I think this would be a great test ground to put content in front of consumers that maybe is a little more independent, a little more avant-garde. I can imagine that it's really hard to get funding for a historical fiction piece set in the early 1800s
Yeah.
because set design, casting, etc. is just so expensive on a risk like that.
I want to change gears a bit and go in and talk a little bit. Maybe we can each share if there's a piece of media or a movie or something that we consumed maybe while we were younger that sparked this love for film, audio, even if it's for entrepreneurship and building in tech, if there's any of those that particularly resonated with you.
Sure. Why don't you go first? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's two that come to mind. Firstly is Fantastic Mr. Fox, like I said before. It was just a movie that I watched with my family, and my dad was like the only DVD that we had while I was a kid, and we watched it constantly, probably once a week for maybe half a year. And for some reason, I don't know how I never got sick of it, but I didn't. There was something so mesmerizing and enticing about it. Maybe it's because I had never seen a movie like it. It's entirely animated and it's in that signature Wes Anderson style, in that everything is super parallel and the colors are really vibrant and bright. And it made me just feel this heightened sense of excitement as a kid. When I first watched it, I was probably like 11 or 12, maybe a little earlier. But it just got me really excited on what sort of the possibilities of filmmaking was. The second example, I think, is probably Her, and that reflects more my position in life now. When I watched it, it really got me excited about storytelling and predicting the future. I think in a lot of ways, Her was able to predict what things are happening in Silicon Valley and what things are happening with people's everyday psychology, and especially with the rise and boom of AI. I think it's more representative of our time now than ever. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it came out in 2013.
Yeah,
And
it's got to be a decade old at this point.
yeah,
Funny enough, Her is one of the movies that I actually have saved on my phone in audio. So I've listened to it a number of times. If I'm on a plane, it's one of those tracks that's always with me. And
Yeah.
it works so well in audio because Joaquin Miller and Scarlett Johansson's voices are such juxtapositions against each other that the conversations are so clear. And as long as you can follow those two characters, the storyline really does just lend itself to audio, having her voice kind of chime in over
Yeah.
his dialogue. It's really something in audio.
Yeah. What's unique about it is in Scarlett Johansson, her character never has a likeness in the movie. And so what I imagine is it would work really well on cassette because her voice is entirely what's acting in the movie.
Totally.
What about you? Are there any particular that kind of got you hooked?
Sure. We had a really nice family tradition when I was a kid. Every winter, my parents would choose a series for us to watch, more of a classic, right? So you can imagine that as kids, we watched The Pink Panther and Back to the Future, and as we got older, it turned into The Godfather and Indiana Jones. And every winter, there was always one series we watched. And it was a really great time to come together as a family that I look back on so fondly. And I think it went beyond just the films. It was the way that films bring people together, that we could all talk and laugh as a unit. And that to me is what really got me hooked on movies and TV shows. But of course, as a kid, I watched children's TV. Nickelodeon was on Saturday morning. My parents actually didn't let us watch TV the week. I had to be on the weekends. Healthy balance, I'd say. But it was an exciting thing for me to unlock and to have access to. And thanks, Mom and Dad, for setting some good boundaries.
Yeah,
And,
for sure.
for me, I think I look back to in my childhood, certainly Back to the Future really was one of those movies, especially as a kid that loves technology. The idea of inventing a time machine was very inspiring to me. And then in my adult life, I would say Good Will Hunting and Whiplash are two movies that stick out. I'm someone who personally I strive to challenge myself to be better, to work on my own skills. So in Whiplash, we see this character who wants to be a great at drumming, right? And so I think that
Yeah.
goes frankly too far, but there's this question of what will we do to achieve greatness and
Yeah.
choosing your lines, how far you'll go. And that's always sat with me. I don't want anyone to throw a symbol at my head or a chair at my head. I do want to be better and push myself. And then Good Will Hunting, I think, is just such a raw story. I think that Robin Williams there, an actor that was, of course, around as I grew up, and seeing him take on a serious role like that, there's just a magic to that film. That's
For sure. Yeah, Robin Williams. It's definitely one of my favorites. Speaking of Robin Williams, have you seen Dead Poets Society?
Of course, absolutely.
I have a funny story about Dead Poets Society. The writer of the book, Dead Poets Society, went to my high school
No way.
and he wrote it about my high school. My high school is a very kind of hoity-toity all-boys school
Yep.
in Nashville, and they taught a lot of the principles that kind of inspired Dead Poets Society. So I don't know if you remember when the group of boys ran around the square in the
Of course.
book. We have that tradition at my high school where we pick the fastest kid from every grade and we run them around the quad, and whoever wins gets bragging rights for their grade.
No,
I love that movie so much. I think it's something that is probably pretty applicable for both of us, this balance of pursuing a life where you're doing art and it's all about poetry and music and beauty. I think that's what the quote was, and balancing that with the expectations that you have for yourself, the expectations that your family has for you to
Sure.
go out and work and do something that you've always wanted to build something special. So I think that one's super relevant for me and was really inspiring for me.
I also really just wanted to stand on my desk. Let's get on the desk and yell a little bit.
Oh, I love that movie so much. Robin Williams, especially, he just made that movie for me. All right, next, I want to chat a bit about what's next for Cassette, what the platform looks like now, where you're at now, what kind of content or creators or films you want to bring in and adapt, and how it's looking.
Yeah. So these kinds of platforms are extremely challenging to build because I want to challenge you to think about any time you've seen top tier content from the Hollywood industry put on a no name app, right? We have Netflix, we have Prime Video, we have Max and Hulu, but are there any third party small apps you can imagine presenting some of the best movies and TV shows?
Yeah, not content specifically. The one example that I could maybe think of, which was a consumer startup that was doing movies, is Letterboxd. But even then, it's content that's generated by its users. It's not streaming.
Yeah, studios are really just handing out. You can't really walk into their office and just say, hey, I'd like one license to Harry Potter, please. It's not really a thing. These are IP companies, and the way that they're presented and branded is everything to them. And so we're coming in and we're asking for something completely new. It's something they have not evaluated before. It is a new concept, right? It's not crazy that most people haven't thought of this, because most people haven't put the time that we have in audio description in the audio world, consuming these movies this way. And so we've been communicating with the major studios about this for nearly a year. This has been a process to understand all the limitations and be baseline as possible. And we're getting close. So for us, the platform is actually built. We have the app, we have the ability to play back, we have some amazing audio controls and AI built into it. I think you'd be really impressed to see kind of the experience we've built around this. And now it's about getting the right library of content. The question I think about very regularly is, what type of content's going to win with the consumer? I have some gut feelings. I think that classic sitcoms, we think about our Friends, our Seinfelds, our Office, the ones that people turn on in the background anyway and are always consuming, are obvious winners. But what other genres and eras of film and TV are going to really hit? And that means that when I talk to the studios, we're looking for a real breadth of content. We're looking to have bits and pieces from horror. We're looking at bits and pieces from drama, romance, comedy, kids. I think that in some testing, we found that action is probably one of the hardest ones to consume this way, because it is such a visual thing.
The visual
you can imagine that The Dark Knight is a lot of like, Batman's in the shadows. He's out of the shadows. He's in the shadows. He's out of the shadows. Banging noises. You're kind of like, wait, where is Batman? The hardest movie to listen to I've ever experienced is Inception. If you were confused watching it, imagine trying to listen to it. It's really difficult. But beyond that, I think that this is all a huge experiment to understand who are the consumers who will love this and what type of content will they love. We're looking to close this out and get our first library of content so our users can start to engage with it, so we can learn, adapt, and keep working with studios to make this a medium that everyone's really familiar with. I think in a few years, the goal is that people look back and say, why couldn't I do this 10 years ago? It seems crazy that we weren't doing this.
Yeah. How does the audio narration process look when you're adapting a film that, I don't know, you get the IP from Disney?
Yeah, there's three ways this can happen. One is old movie, audio descriptions already produced for it, and by law they had to do it. Tracks already exist. We just move it over to our app. Maybe we do a couple of adjustments to volume and to the way the credits are done to make them more engaging for the consumer and easier to listen to. But really, it's just the process of moving it from their vault to a platform where people can listen to it. The second is ones that were produced, but maybe the quality wasn't really there. Maybe it's at a time where they were using technology, methodologies for just even writing and recording that don't lend themselves to the best possible audio experience. And then finally, there are ones that were never made with audio description. There's no narration. You can think movies in the 90s, 80s, 70s, and before, many of them didn't have the requirements to have them made. And we'll go back and basically say, okay, let us have someone watch this, make notes on what's happening, adapt that into a script, have a voice-over artist record themselves making it, edit all together, and then for me, I'd love to have this is a perfect moment for a blind staff member to listen to it and say, here's what works, here's what doesn't work, right? An amazing opportunity for someone who spent their whole life, or at least many years, evaluating audio description, be the professional on kind of making sure it meets the standard of kind of enjoying the whole story without any visuals.
Let's say there's an independent director that comes to you with a project, or in the future, you're deciding to do originals and you want to work with indie directors and indie projects. Is there a type of director that you think you would be particularly excited to work with?
Yeah, I think that a director who spent a little bit of time listening to audio description, I'm not saying they have to spend hours and hours, but familiarize themselves and have an opinion on what works and what doesn't. The reality is there's no right or wrong way to do this. There are certainly things that you should and must do, but there's no, in the artistic sense, right or wrong way to make audio description. So I think someone who has an opinion on what makes audio great is the kind of director I want to work with. And so I think that I'm experienced and practiced in producing this stuff. Let's sit down. Let's work through a script. I can bring that expertise on the things that must be in there. And a very easy example is, if the audience is laughing from something they saw on screen, someone who's listening to it should know why they're laughing, right? That's one very easy and pillar of comedic audio description. people don't want to feel left out of the joke if it's a visual gag. And so bringing that expertise and mixing it with their creativity for why is someone in a film or TV show taking an action? Why do they act this way? And we bake that into the script. Then we can find a great voiceover actor, bring it to life, and put it together.
Yeah. If there was a dream voiceover actor that you would want to hire for a project, who do you think it would be? Obviously, like I jumped to Morgan Freeman, of course.
Don't we all
But
just want everything narrated by Morgan Freeman?
I think
What
so.
a gem for society. I don't think there's a specific voice actor that I want in any movie because every movie's so different and the tone is set by that voice actor. If I'm listening to a Good Will Hunting, I think that small melodic voice that just tells the story as it occurs is the voice I want. Whereas if I'm listening to a fast-paced, action-packed piece of audio, I want someone who's going to emote and evoke a ton with their words and bring volume and excitement and all that energy there and then come down when things, happen. And the last thing I'll say is you want a voice that stands out from the other actors in the actual film, right? So I've had people say, oh, it would be so great to have Morgan Freeman narrate The Shawshank Redemption. And then you sit there and
He's
say,
in the Shawshank.
Redemption. You won't
Yeah.
know if he's talking or if the narrator's talking. Now, granted, a lot of that movie actually is narrated by Morgan Freeman. If you listen to it, you can hear him say, the year was 1950 when so-and-so arrived at prison. And so you have that moment. But I think thoughtful decision-making around voices is really core here. I worked on a film years ago called Donnybrook. It was an IFC film about a Donnybrook, a backyard brawl for money. And we had this great voice actor named Jerry Cannon who had this deep, resonant voice. And it was just magic to hear him just tell this brutal story with the volume of his sound. And I really enjoyed that project specifically.
All right. As we wrap up, maybe we'll do another fun movie segment or a little exercise there. Are there any moments in film, audio moments in film, sound moments in film that were unexpected or you think are underrated, or you think if you're talking to a director on how to effectively do sound, is there a film or a scene to point to be like, this is how things are done. This is how you take the reins and this is how you do something different.
Totally.
Okay.
All right, cool. One odd moment that is not a sound effect, it's actually an actor making a sound effect as part of their line, is Jason Mantzoukas in The League. At one point, he's a porn director, and he goes into a producer or a publisher's office, and I worked so hard on this, I even made my own sound effects. And he proceeds to make the sound effects of his mouth in that moment, and that's not great sound design, but it's a sound in a deep track moment that really takes up way too much space in my mind. A sound effect that really stands out to me is one that I didn't think I noticed until I listened to the movie. Is a fun one that I've always enjoyed is Zombieland. It's early in the film. Woody Harrelson is barreling down the highway. We haven't met him yet. He's in a black Cadillac, and this hardcore rock music comes on. All we've had so far is Jesse Eisenberg being an anxious little man who's terrified of this world. And all of a sudden we've got this gritty thing as this car barrels down and it has a plow on the front and it knocks a bunch of cars out of the way on the highway. And Woody Harrelson gets out, boots on the ground happen, and they're standing in this silence. And what we have to realize about this moment in the movie is these are two people finding each other in a world where they don't know if any other humans are alive. And so the scale of this moment, the aloneness, and the fact that they're crossing paths needs to be told through audio. And it is the silence in that moment, the caw of an eagle overhead. I'm not even sure if you see it. I can't remember from the actual visuals if you see it or if it's just a noise off screen that tells you everything you need to know about the juxtaposition of characters, their aloneness in this scene, possibly that this highway is just littered with dead people, with carrion that, this eagle might be searching for. And it leaves you wondering what's going to happen next. Is this a fight? Is this a truce? Is this an alliance? Is this a rivalry? And something about that eagle sound in that moment is the sound that stuck out to me from that movie.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible too. I think the one that I think of off the bat is Sound of Metal, and you can probably attest to it as well. But if I was teaching a director, or if I wanted to learn how to do sound on my own as a director and as a filmmaker, I think there's no better example, especially as the movie is, you're trying to depict what the experience of somebody who's gone deaf,
Sure.
what happens. And I don't know if it would be the best fit for cassette because there's such drastic changes
Yeah.
in your audio levels, and there's some points that are completely silent and some points that are not. But if you're looking for a masterclass in sound design and audio, and I think it won best sound at the Oscars the year that it was eligible. I don't think there's any better example than that. That's fantastic.
I have a funny story about that movie is that when they were making it, I was in touch with, I remember if it was the producer or director of Sound of Metal, and they had got in touch with us to ask about what they could do to make that movie more accessible. And also how to make that movie really portray someone's progression into deafness. And one of the things we talked about, I don't think it was ended up being technically feasible in theaters across America, but you can imagine a deaf audience member does not understand through hearing the regression of sound. And one concept that I brought forward was, what if we had the captions blur over time? So it'd be a cool way to visually portray that loss of sound, that if there were subtitles for a deaf audience member, that the less that the main character could hear, the more blurred the captions would become. You get that sense of, wait, I can't understand what he's saying because you can't read it. And just one more way to mirror sound and visual against each other. Didn't know that happened.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No,
that's really cool. Would have never imagined seeing subtitles in that way as well. That's a really cool way to think about it. Conversation. All right. Thank you, Alex, for taking the time, speaking to me a little bit more about Cassette and what you all are doing, as well as just talking movies with me. It's one of my favorite things to do.
No, it's fun to chat about this stuff. I think that it's such a new concept, an opportunity to share with people what catalyzed this, from my own experiences with vision loss to just being in this industry, and just recognizing the opportunity in today's culture where people are saying, I want to spend time away from my screen, but I also want to engage with the amazing content coming out of this industry. How do we create a happy medium? So having a platform that's designed to do that is what this is all about, plus the added benefits of what it can do for blind and low vision audiences who historically haven't had the same kind of access that the general consumer has had. So we're going to have a great opportunity with the general population who just love movies and film, and an opportunity to do some good in bringing more access across the entire landscape.
Yeah, I love that. So where can the people follow and follow along with the journey of Cassette as well, Alex?
Totally. So the app is going to go live in the coming months, and you can get on the wait list. The website is oncassette.com, oncassette.com, and there's a wait list there. But I know that you're also working on some content on social. So I know we're talking film, we're talking audio, just all things around this industry, and you do a great job bringing content together. So remind me what the Instagram is one more time.
Yeah, it's at Cut the Cassette on Instagram. We're featuring a lot, the best film and audio moments, and we're also planning on featuring some directors and people involved in the film industry, audio industry as well. So if you're curious about the journey there, you can follow there and send us some insights. Tell us what movies you want to see on Cassette. Share your favorite moments in film, and we'll likely feature them. We'll feature some people too who are doing some really creative things in the entertainment industry as well.
Awesome. Yeah, this is all we think about. Let's get some people around, and we love community because this is going to be, I think, a movement, really. I think it's going to be super cool to see people engage in this new way of being in touch with the stories they love.
I totally agree. Thanks so much for your time, Alex. I appreciate it.
Thank you.